A waitress saw a crying baby and comforted him, not knowing his millionaire father was watching everything. Before we dive in, this video is traveling across time zones right now. Share what season you're experiencing where you live. Theo. Gentle patter of Seattle rain against the windows of Cascade Restaurant did nothing to soothe 8-month-old Sophie Bennett's wails. Her father, Jackson Bennett, bounced her desperately on his knee while trying to maintain eye contact with the T.O. 3 investors seated across from him at table 7. As I was saying, Jackson raised his voice over Sophie's cries. The third quarter projections show a 15% increase in... Sophie's scream reached a new pitch, causing heads to turn throughout the upscale dining room. Sweat beaded on Jackson's forehead despite the restaurant's cool temperature. At 35, the tech millionaire had conquered Silicon Valley, built a thriving company in Seattle, and was known for his unflappable demeanor in the most high-pressure business situations. Yet here he sat, completely undone by an infant who hadn't stopped crying for what felt like 3 months straight. 3 months. Exactly how long Olivia had been gone. "Mr. Bennett," said Vanessa Chen, the lead investor, her smile tightening at the corners. "Perhaps we should reschedule. I understand your situation." Jackson shifted Sophie to his other knee, the diaper bag sliding off his shoulder and spilling its contents onto the polished hardwood floor. "No, please. I apologize for the disruption. My regular sitter canceled last minute and He stopped himself. These people didn't need his excuses. They needed confidence that he could still lead his company, despite his personal tragedy. Across the room, Emma Taylor watched the scene unfold as she delivered a tray of cocktails to a nearby table. At 28, she moved with the efficiency of someone who had spent years in food service, though she'd only been at Cascade for 6 months since moving from Georgia. The upscale restaurant wasn't her dream job, but the tips were good. Money she desperately needed for her grandmother's heart surgery that insurance wouldn't cover. Emma noticed the manager's deepening frown as he glanced at table 7. Wealthy? Regulars like Jackson Bennett were the restaurant's lifeblood, and a screaming baby was bad for the elegant atmosphere they worked so hard to maintain. "Emma," her manager whispered sharply as she passed, "table 3 is still waiting on their wine pairing." "Yes, sir," she replied, but her eyes remained on the struggling father. She recognized that look of desperation, the same one she'd worn many times while raising her 3 younger siblings after their mother died. The man's eyes were hollow with exhaustion, his designer suit immaculate but his spirit clearly broken. The baby's cries intensified, and Emma saw the businessman's shoulders slump in defeat. The investors exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Whatever deal they were discussing was slipping away with each piercing wail. When his phone rang, Jackson checked the screen and his expression tightened. "I have to take this. It's the office." He stood awkwardly, trying to balance the screaming infant while reaching for his phone. Emma didn't know what possessed her in that moment. Perhaps it was the memory of her own struggles, or perhaps it was simply human compassion. But she found herself moving toward table 7 just as Jackson's business associates began gathering their materials to leave. The baby's face was red with exertion, tiny fists clenched in what looked like both rage and pain. The father looked just as anguished as he glanced between his screaming daughter and the departing investors, holding his phone with a white-knuckled grip. Their eyes met across the room, his desperate, hers understanding, and in that silent moment, neither could possibly know how their lives were about to change forever. Jackson stepped away from the table, phone pressed tightly against his ear as he tried to hear over Sophie's wails. Emma watched him pace near the restaurant's entrance, his shoulders tense as he spoke rapidly into the phone. Sophie's cries escalated to a pitch that made several diners wince. The manager caught Emma's eye and nodded slightly. Permission granted. Taking a deep breath, Emma approached table 7. "Hi there, little one," Emma whispered, crouching beside the carrier where Jackson had set Sophie. The baby's face was blotched red with exertion, tears streaming down her chubby cheeks. Emma noticed the slightly sour smell immediately. Diaper change was definitely needed. With practiced movements, Emma gently lifted Sophie from the carrier. "It's all right, sugar," she murmured, cradling the infant against her shoulder. The baby's cries stuttered briefly in surprise at the new touch before resuming with renewed vigor. Emma began humming softly, a lullaby her grandmother had taught her, something old and sweet from the Georgia mountains. Her hand patted a gentle rhythm against Sophie's back as she swayed from side to side. Sophie's tiny fist clutched Emma's uniform, her wails gradually diminishing to hiccuping sobs. "That's it, sweet pea," Emma whispered. "You're just overwhelmed, aren't you? Too many loud voices, too many strangers." By the time Jackson returned, Sophie's cries had subsided to occasional whimpers. He stopped short, staring in disbelief at his suddenly calm daughter in a stranger's arms. "How did you?" he began, his voice hoarse. Emma smiled gently. "I helped raise my 3 younger siblings. I hope you don't mind. Your little one needed a diaper change and seemed overstimulated by all the noise." "Mind?" Jackson's laugh was short and brittle. "She hasn't been quiet for more than 10 minutes since." He trailed off, the grief in his eyes raw and recent. "Not for weeks." Emma nodded, understanding without needing the details. "Babies sense emotional distress. It makes them feel unsafe." "I've gone through 4 nannies in 3 months, Jackson confessed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "None of them could settle her." Sophie snuggled deeper against Emma's neck, her breathing evening out. The investors had long since departed, leaving their half-finished meals and untouched contracts on the table. "May I?" Jackson gestured to take his daughter back. "Of course." Emma carefully transferred Sophie to her father's arms, showing him how to support her head. "Keep her against your heartbeat. The rhythm is soothing." To Jackson's amazement, Sophie remained calm, her eyelids drooping with exhaustion. "You're a natural," he said, studying Emma with newfound interest. "Have you worked with children professionally?" "Just family experience," Emma replied, beginning to collect the scattered contents of the diaper bag from the floor. "But I've always had a way with little ones." Jackson seemed to be considering something, his gaze traveling between his peaceful daughter and Emma. "I know this is completely unorthodox, but would you—" He hesitated, then continued more firmly. "Would you consider a childcare position? I'm desperate, as you can probably tell." Emma blinked in surprise. "I'm flattered, but I have a job here." "Whatever they're paying you, I'll triple it," Jackson said without hesitation. "Plus room and board if you want it. I need someone who can connect with Sophie." The offer hung in the air between them. Emma thought of her grandmother's mounting medical bills, the tiny apartment she shared with a roommate, the culinary dreams she'd put on hold. "I can't make a decision like this on the spot," she said carefully. Jackson nodded, reaching into his jacket pocket with his free hand. "Here's my card. Call me tomorrow if you're interested." He paused, vulnerability flashing across his face. "Please consider it. For her sake." As Emma took the card, Sophie's tiny hand reached out and grabbed her finger, holding on with surprising strength. It felt, in that moment, strangely like a sign. "He offered you what?" Melissa's eyes widened as she sat across from Emma at their tiny kitchen table. $6,000 a month plus room and board? Emma nodded, still stunned by the figure Jackson had confirmed over the phone earlier that day. "It's more than triple what I make at Cascade." "Girl, you'd be insane not to take it." Melissa gestured around their cramped apartment. "This place isn't exactly the Ritz." Emma twisted the phone cord around her finger, an old habit from childhood. She'd just finished a 20-minute call with her grandmother in Georgia, seeking her wisdom. "Grandma says it sounds like a blessing," Emma said quietly. The extra money would cover her surgery and recovery costs completely. "Then what's holding you back?" Emma sighed, thinking of the haunted look in Jackson Bennett's eyes. "I'd be walking into a house of grief. That poor baby lost her mother and her father is barely holding it together. So they need you," Melissa stated simply. "And you need the money." The next morning, Emma met Jackson at a coffee shop near Cascade. Sophie was with him, strapped into a designer stroller but mercifully asleep. "Thank you for considering this," Jackson said, his voice low to avoid waking his daughter. Up close, in the daylight, Emma noticed the fine lines of exhaustion around his eyes. "I realize how unusual the offer must seem." "It is," Emma agreed. "I have some questions before I can decide." Jackson nodded. "Of course." "Would I have any days off? I'd need to maintain some independence." "Absolutely. We can arrange for a weekend service or I can take over on weekends," Jackson replied. "I want to be more involved with Sophie. He glanced at his sleeping daughter. "I don't seem to have the touch you do." "I'd need that in writing, along with my duties and compensation," Emma continued. Her grandmother had insisted on this point. "And I'd want references checked on both sides." A hint of respect flickered in Jackson's eyes. "You're thorough, I appreciate that." They discussed logistics for another hour. The position would include caring for Sophie, managing her schedule, and light household organization. Emma would have her own suite in Jackson's lakeside home, a car for transportation, health insurance, and weekends flexible. "I'll need to give proper notice at Cascade," Emma said finally. 2 weeks. Jackson's relief was palpable. "That's perfectly reasonable. I can arrange temporary help until then." As they stood to leave, Sophie stirred and began to fuss. Without thinking, Emma reached into the stroller and adjusted the baby's blanket, humming softly. Sophie settled immediately. "It's decided then," Jackson said, watching the interaction with something like hope in his eyes. 2 weeks passed in a blur. Emma worked day shifts at Cascade, training her replacement and saying goodbye to regular customers. Nights were spent researching infant development and organizing her limited possessions. "You sure about this?" her manager asked on her last day, handing Emma her final paycheck. "Bennett's got a reputation as a demanding boss." "I'm sure about Sophie," Emma replied truthfully. The baby had captured her heart in their brief interactions. That evening, Emma stood in her empty bedroom, suitcase packed beside her. Melissa leaned against the doorframe. "Our little Georgia peach moving into a mansion," she teased. "Don't forget us, little people." Emma laughed, but anxiety fluttered in her stomach. Was she making a terrible mistake? Moving into a stranger's home, caring for his motherless child. It sounded like the beginning of a Lifetime movie that could end very badly. Her phone pinged with a text from Jackson. "Car will pick you up at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Sophie's excited to have you join us." Emma doubted. An 8-month-old could express such sentiments, but the message eased her nerves slightly. This was the right decision. For her grandmother, for Sophie, and maybe even for herself. She just hoped the reality would match the promise of that moment in the restaurant when Sophie had first quieted in her arms. Emma's first impression of Jackson Bennett's lakeside home was that it resembled a showroom rather than a family residence. Sleek, modern, and impeccably decorated, yet strangely impersonal. Her second impression upon closer inspection was that beneath the surface elegance lurked complete chaos. The kitchen contained expensive appliances, but empty cupboards. The nursery featured a designer crib, but disorganized supplies. Laundry overflowed in the utility room, and dust gathered in corners despite evidence of a cleaning service. "Your suite is this way," Jackson said, leading her down a hallway. He carried Sophie, who watched Emma with solemn eyes. "I hope it meets your expectations." The guest suite exceeded them, a spacious bedroom with attached bath and small sitting area, all overlooking Lake Washington. Emma set down her suitcase, momentarily overwhelmed. "It's perfect," she managed. "Thank you." "I'll let you settle in," Jackson replied, shifting Sophie in his arms. "I have calls this afternoon. Sophie usually naps around 1, but..." He hesitated. "That's more aspirational than actual these days." After he left, Emma sat on the edge of the bed, struck by the enormity of what she'd undertaken. A baby who wouldn't sleep, a grieving father, and a household in disarray. All now her responsibility. "One step at a time," she murmured. Her grandmother's Favorite saying. Emma's first week was devoted to observation and organization. She created a detailed log of Sophie's eating, sleeping, and crying patterns. She organized the kitchen, nursery, and laundry systems. Most importantly, she established a consistent routine for Sophie, something the household desperately lacked. By day 3, Emma had identified specific triggers for Sophie's distress: overtiredness, overstimulation, and the scent of Jackson's cologne, which possibly reminded her of her mother. Emma gently suggested he switch brands. "You think her crying is because of my cologne?" Jackson asked skeptically. "Scent is our strongest memory trigger," Emma explained. "She associates it with something that's now missing." To her surprise, the next morning, Jackson appeared without his usual woodsy fragrance. That evening, Sophie allowed him to hold her for 15 minutes without crying, a new record. Emma researched infant development extensively after Sophie was asleep. The baby showed classic signs of colic and attachment anxiety, unsurprising given her recent loss. Emma implemented gentle techniques: white noise, warm baths, and baby massage. Gradually, Sophie began sleeping for longer stretches. Her piercing wails diminished to occasional whimpers. The transformation wasn't immediate, but by week 3 the changes were undeniable. One evening, Jackson arrived home earlier than usual, pausing in the nursery doorway where Emma sat rocking Sophie. "She's asleep," he whispered, astonished. "Actually sleeping." Emma nodded, continuing the gentle rocking motion. 40 minutes and counting. "How did you do it?" "Consistency," Emma replied softly. "Babies need predictability to feel secure. When everything else changes, routine becomes their safety net." Something in her words seemed to resonate with Jackson. He entered the room cautiously, watching his daughter's peaceful face. "I haven't been very consistent, have I?" he admitted. "Between work crises and just trying to survive each day." "You've been grieving," Emma said simply. "That takes all the energy a person has." Jackson's gaze shifted to her, surprise evident in his expression. "Yes," he said finally. "I suppose I have been." The following week, Jackson began arriving home by 6 instead of 8. He asked Emma to show him how to prepare Sophie's evening bottle, how to hold her properly, how to recognize her different cries. "This one means she's tired," Emma explained as Sophie fussed one evening. "Notice how it's lower pitched than her hungry cry?" Jackson listened intently, his focus absolute, the same concentration Emma imagined he applied to business acquisitions. "You're a natural teacher," he commented later, successfully having put Sophie down for the night. Emma smiled. "I had good practice with my siblings." As Sophie's demeanor improved, so did the household atmosphere. The baby's first genuine laugh occurred during her bath time, startling both Emma and Jackson with its unexpected joy. "Do that again," Jackson urged, phone ready to record. Emma repeated the peekaboo motion, and Sophie's delighted gurgle filled the bathroom. Jackson's smile in that moment transformed his face completely, erasing the perpetual worry lines that had seemed permanently etched there. "That's the first time I've heard her laugh," he said quietly, lowering his phone. "I was beginning to think she never would." Emma met his gaze over Sophie's head. "There will be many more firsts," she promised, "and you'll be there for all of them." The words hung between them, a commitment beyond employment, an assurance that somehow they would navigate this journey together. 2 months into her employment, Emma had established a comfortable rhythm in the Bennett household. Sophie now slept through most nights, her daytime demeanor transformed from perpetual distress to occasional contentment. The changes in Jackson were equally remarkable. He'd begun working from home 1 day a week and arrived by dinner time most evenings. One Wednesday night, after Sophie was asleep, Emma found herself restless. The house was quiet except for the distant tap of keyboard keys from Jackson's home office. She wandered into the kitchen, deciding to bake her grandmother's peach cobbler, a comfort food from her childhood. She was pulling the bubbling dessert from the oven when Jackson appeared in the doorway, drawn by the aroma. "That smells incredible," he said, leaning against the doorframe. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his shirt sleeves, looking more relaxed than Emma had ever seen him. "Family recipe," Emma replied, setting the cobbler on a cooling rack. "My grandmother believes dessert can solve most problems." "Smart woman." Jackson's smile was genuine, if still tinged with sadness at the edges. "Is there enough to share?" They sat at the kitchen island, the cobbler between them. Jackson took a bite and closed his eyes. "This tastes like summer." "Georgia summers," Emma agreed. "Peaches so ripe the juice runs down your arm when you bite them." "You miss it," Jackson observed. "You're home." Emma nodded. "Parts of it. The pace, mostly. Slower, deliberate. Seattle always seems in such a hurry." "Including me," Jackson acknowledged ruefully. "Especially you," Emma teased gently, surprising herself with the familiarity. Instead of retreating behind his usual professional wall, Jackson laughed. "Guilty as charged. Olivia used to say the same thing." It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife's name voluntarily. Emma remained quiet, allowing him the space to continue if he wished. "I should check some files," Jackson said abruptly, the moment of openness passing. "Thank you for the cobbler." Later that night, Emma passed Jackson's office on her way to her suite. The door stood slightly ajar, spilling a rectangle of light into the hallway. She glimpsed him sitting motionless, staring at his computer screen and so hesitated, then knocked softly. "Jackson, everything all right?" He didn't answer immediately. When Emma cautiously pushed the door wider, she saw what held his attention. A slideshow of photographs, a younger Jackson with a beautiful woman with warm brown eyes and a dazzling smile. "That's Olivia," he said without looking up. "These are from our college days." Emma started to retreat. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "No, please." Jackson gestured to a chair. "Sometimes it helps to remember the beginning, not just the end." Emma sat unsure of her role in this moment. Employer and employee seemed inadequate labels for sharing such intimate grief. "We met at Stanford," Jackson continued, eyes still on the screen where Olivia laughed on a beach, her hair whipping in the wind. "Computer science lab partners. She was brilliant, smarter than me, though she'd never admit it. We built the company together." Emma watched as images chronicled their life. Graduation, first office, wedding, international travels. "We tried for years to have a child," Jackson said quietly. "Tests, treatments, specialists, nothing worked. Then we found a fertility clinic. Overseas in Thailand, we spent 6 months there for the treatments." His voice caught. "Sophie was our miracle." Emma's heart ached for the journey this family had traveled. The joy of finally having their daughter, only for Olivia to be taken just months later. "What happened?" she asked gently. "Aneurysm," Jackson replied, his voice hollow. "Undetected, untreatable. She collapsed at home while I was at work. By the time I got to the hospital," he shook his head. "One day she was here, planning Sophie's first Christmas, and the next?" Emma reached across the desk, briefly touching his hand. A gesture of simple human comfort. "She'd be proud of you. Continuing for Sophie's sake." Jackson looked at her then, truly looked at her, as if seeing past the role of nanny to the person beneath. "I haven't been doing very well at it, not until you came." The moment stretched between them, weighted with unspoken emotions, gratitude, understanding, and something else neither was prepared to name. Jackson finally broke the silence. "It's late. You should get some rest." Emma nodded, rising to leave. At the door she paused. "Thank you for sharing her with me." That night, lying in bed, Emma realized the household dynamic had subtly shifted. She'd glimpsed behind Jackson's carefully constructed walls, and he had allowed it. The implication both comforted and unsettled her as she drifted toward sleep. November brought relentless storms to Seattle, with wind and rain lashing against the windows of the Bennett home. Emma had grown accustomed to the weather's mood swings, but nothing prepared her for the evening when lightning struck a nearby transformer, plunging the entire neighborhood into darkness. She was bathing Sophie when it happened. The bathroom instantly went black, the baby letting out a startled wail. "It's okay, sweet pea," Emma soothed, quickly wrapping Sophie in a towel. "Just a little power outage." Her phone flashlight guided them to the nursery, where she dressed Sophie in warm pajamas. The house had grown noticeably colder already. Emma frowned, remembering Jackson mentioning a backup generator. Shouldn't it have kicked in by now? Cradling Sophie against her shoulder, Emma made her way downstairs. She found Jackson in the garage, flashlight illuminating his frustrated expression as he examined the silent generator. "Dead," he announced when he saw her. "Maintenance company was supposed to service it last month." He ran a hand through his hair. "Forecast says the storm's intensifying. Power could be out all night." Emma bounced Sophie gently. "How cold will the house get?" "Too cold for her," Jackson replied, concern evident in his voice. "The glass walls are beautiful but terrible for insulation." They returned to the main house where Jackson began gathering supplies: blankets, flashlights, bottled water. Emma watched him work with military precision, impressed by his calm efficiency in crisis. "We should use the fireplace in the living room," he suggested. "It's the most enclosed space on this floor." 20 minutes later, a fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the room. Jackson had pushed furniture aside to create a makeshift sleeping area on the floor, layering blankets and pillows into a comfortable nest. "Not exactly 5-star accommodations," he said wryly, setting a battery-powered lantern nearby. "Better than camping in Georgia during thunderstorm season," Emma replied, settling Sophie onto the blankets. "My brothers thought it was a great idea until our tent flooded at 2 a.m. Jackson smiled as he added another log to the fire. "You haven't talked much about your family." "Not much to tell," Emma said, though both knew that wasn't true. "My mother died when I was 16. Father wasn't in the picture. My grandmother helped, but I raised my siblings mostly on my own." "How many?" "3. All boys." Emma laughed softly. "Wild as March hares, every one of them." Outside, thunder crashed, and rain pelted the windows with renewed vigor. Sophie, surprisingly, remained asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily in the firelight. "She trusts you completely," Jackson observed. "She knows she's safe with you." The simple statement carried unexpected weight. Emma looked down at Sophie, throat tight with emotion. "I never planned on childcare work," she admitted. "It was just survival, taking care of my brothers." "What did you plan?" Jackson asked, settling on the floor across from her, the sleeping baby between them. "Culinary school," Emma replied. "I wanted to open a small southern restaurant. Nothing fancy, just good, honest food that reminds people of home." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "And now?" "Dreams got deferred," Emma shrugged. "My grandmother's medical bills took priority. Then moving here, starting over." "What about you?" she asked, deflecting attention from herself. "Did you always want to build a tech empire?" Jackson's laugh was unexpected. "God, no, I wanted to teach computer science. The company was Olivia's vision initially. I just happened to write code that people wanted." His expression sobered. "Now I'm barely keeping it afloat, between grief and being a single parent." The admission hung in the intimate space between them. Emma realized how few people probably knew the truth about his struggling company. The vulnerable confession touched something deep within her. "You're doing better than you think," she said softly. "With Sophie, with everything." Jackson's eyes met hers across the firelight. "Only because you're here." The intensity of his gaze made Emma's heart quicken. The storm, the darkness, the isolation. Everything had created a bubble outside normal time, where truths could emerge that daylight would keep hidden. Jackson moved closer, his hand brushing hers as he adjusted Sophie's blanket. The touch sent warmth spreading up Emma's arm. "Emma," he said quietly, her name almost a question. She looked up, finding his face inches from hers. The firelight carved shadows beneath his cheekbones, softened the usual tension around his mouth. Without her conscious decision, Emma found herself leaning forward. Their lips were a breath apart when Sophie stirred between them, tiny fist rubbing at her eyes. The moment shattered like fine glass. Emma pulled back immediately, reality rushing. "Swanson, she needs her late feeding," she said, voice unsteady. She busied herself preparing a bottle from the supplies they'd brought down. Jackson watched her, regret and confusion warring in his expression. "Emma, it's fine." She cut him off, focusing intently on the bottle. Just the storm, the situation, heightened emotions. She handed him the prepared bottle, careful to avoid touching his fingers. "You should feed her. It'll help strengthen your bond." Jackson accepted without argument, though his eyes told her this conversation wasn't truly over. As he fed his daughter, Emma retreated to the edge of their makeshift camp, wrapping her arms around her knees. What had she been thinking? He was her employer. She was his employee. Lines existed for a reason, and she'd nearly crossed one that could destroy everything she'd built here. Sophie's stability, her own financial security, the delicate balance of their household. Outside, lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the room beyond the fire's glow. In that flash, Emma caught Jackson watching her, his expression unreadable in the momentary brightness. The thunder that followed seemed to echo her own turbulent thoughts. The week following the storm brought sunshine outside and glacial formality inside the Bennett home. Emma and Jackson orbited each other with painful politeness, their interactions limited to brief exchanges about Sophie's schedule and needs. "I'll be in meetings until 6, Jackson would say, barely meeting her eyes. "Sophie has her pediatrician. Appointment at 3, Emma would respond, focusing on the baby rather than the father. Gone were the easy conversations over dinner, the shared laughter at Sophie's antics, the casual comfort they developed. In their place, strained silence and careful distance, Emma threw herself into her duties with heightened professionalism. She created elaborate developmental activities for Sophie, researched baby nutrition with scientific precision, and maintained the household with military efficiency. If Jackson noticed her excessive dedication, he didn't mention it. For his part, Jackson worked longer hours, often calling to say he'd be late. When home, he retreated to his office, door firmly closed. The almost kiss hung between them, unacknowledged, yet impossible to forget. One afternoon, Emma placed Sophie on a playmat in the living room, surrounded by colorful toys. The baby had been trying to sit unassisted for days, determined despite repeated toppling. "You're getting it, sweet girl," Emma encouraged, providing minimal support to Sophie's back. When Sophie managed to balance for several seconds alone, Emma cheered. "Jackson, come quick." He appeared in the doorway, alarmed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," Emma laughed. "Watch." Sophie wobbled but maintained her sitting position, beaming with baby pride. The milestone momentarily bridged the awkwardness between adults. Jackson dropped to his knees beside the playmat, genuine delight lighting his features. "That's my girl," he said softly, capturing the moment on his phone. "What a big accomplishment." Sophie responded with a delighted gurgle, rocking forward to pat her father's knee. Jackson looked up at Emma, his smile unguarded for the first time in days. "Thank you for calling me." "Of course," she replied, warmth spreading through her chest. "You should be here for her firsts." For a moment, they simply smiled at each other, the tension between them temporarily forgotten in shared joy. Then Jackson's phone rang, shattering the connection. "I should take this," he said, already retreating behind his professional mask. "Great job, Sophie, and thanks, Emma." The moment passed, walls rebuilt. 2 days later, Jackson's sister Catherine arrived for Thanksgiving weekend. Tall and sleek, with her brother's blue eyes and direct manner, she swept into the house like a perfectly styled hurricane. "Look at this little dumpling," she exclaimed, lifting Sophie from Emma's arms without preamble. "Jackson, she's doubled in size since I saw her last." Catherine's presence changed the household dynamic instantly. She filled silent spaces with questions, observations, and New York fashion industry gossip. Where Jackson was reserved, Catherine was exuberant. Where he was careful, she was blunt. So, she cornered Emma in the kitchen while Jackson prepared the grill for steaks. "How long have you been in love with my brother?" Emma nearly dropped the bowl she was holding. "Excuse me?" Catherine's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Please. The tension between you two is thicker than my Thanksgiving gravy. Something happened, didn't it?" "Nothing happened," Emma protested, focusing intently on the salad she was preparing. "Mr. Bennett is my employer." "Mr. Bennett?" Catherine laughed. "Oh, honey, you've got it bad." Emma felt heat rush to her cheeks. "You're mistaken. I care about Sophie, that's all." Catherine's expression softened as she glanced toward the patio, where her brother was explaining something to his daughter, who watched from her bouncer with solemn attention. "He hasn't looked at anyone since Olivia," Catherine said quietly. "Not until you. I saw it the moment I arrived." She touched Emma's arm gently. "Be careful with his heart and yours. Neither of you is as ready as you think." "There's nothing to be ready for," Emma insisted, discomfort growing. "Our relationship is strictly professional." Catherine's knowing look made it clear she didn't believe a word. "If you say so." She grabbed a slice of cucumber from the salad. "Just know that when Jackson Bennett loves, it's with everything he has. It nearly destroyed him when Olivia died." Before Emma could respond, Jackson entered with Sophie. "Steaks are on," he announced. "Catherine, are you interrogating my staff?" "Just getting acquainted with the woman who's raised your daughter from the dead," Catherine replied cheerfully. "Emma was just telling me how professional your relationship is." Jackson's eyes met Emma's briefly before sliding away. "Emma has been invaluable," he said neutrally. That evening, after dinner and once Sophie was asleep, Emma overheard the siblings talking on the patio. "You're different with her," Catherine was saying, "more like your old self." "She's good with Sophie," came Jackson's measured response. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." Emma moved away, not wanting to eavesdrop further, but Catherine's parting words followed her up the stairs. "Life gives second chances, Jackson. Don't be too afraid to take yours." January brought cold clarity to Seattle, crystalline days where sunlight reflected off frost-covered surfaces with blinding intensity. Inside the Bennett home, the awkwardness following Catherine's Thanksgiving visit had gradually thawed, replaced by a tentative new normal. "I'd like to create a baby book for Sophie," Jackson mentioned one evening as they reviewed the week's schedule. "Something with photos, milestones, memories." Emma smiled, pleased by his initiative. "That's a wonderful idea. I've been keeping notes of her development we could include." "Would you help organize it?" Jackson asked. "I've collected digital files, but they're a mess. You have a better eye for this sort of thing." Touched by his trust, Emma agreed. The next afternoon, while Sophie napped, she settled at the desk in her suite with Jackson's laptop. He'd given her access to the family cloud storage, a digital archive of photos and videos dating back years. "The Sophie folder should be under Family," he'd explained. "Password is her birth date. It's what I use for everything personal." Emma navigated through meticulously organized business files until she reached the family section. There she found folders labeled Wedding, Honeymoon, Home Construction, and finally, Sophie. She clicked on it, entering the baby's birth date when prompted. 05/17/2024. Inside were hundreds of photos and videos, Sophie's first days, hospital bracelets, coming home outfit, monthly milestone pictures. Emma began sorting chronologically, creating subfolders for each month of the baby's life. As she worked, she noticed a folder titled simply O, tucked among the baby pictures. Assuming it contained more photos of Olivia with Sophie, Emma clicked on it, entering the same password. When prompted, access denied. Frowning, she tried again, careful with each digit. Again, denied. She was about to move on when a thought occurred to her. If O stood for Olivia, perhaps the password was her birth date instead. Jackson had mentioned it once, April 12th. Emma entered 04/12/1989. The folder opened, revealing not photos but video files, each labeled with a date. The most recent was from April, just weeks before Olivia's death. Curiosity mingled with unease as Emma clicked on it. Olivia's face filled the screen, beautiful but gaunt, her complexion pale beneath carefully applied makeup. She sat in what appeared to be a hotel room, Bangkok visible through the window behind her. "Jackson, my love," Olivia began, her voice soft but steady. "If you're watching this, something has happened to me, and there are truths you need to know about Sophie." Emma's finger hovered over the pause button. This was clearly private, not meant for her eyes. Yet Olivia's next words froze her in place. "Sophie isn't biologically ours, not in the way you believe." The room seemed to tilt around Emma as Olivia continued, explaining how after multiple failed fertility treatments at the Bangkok clinic, she had made a private arrangement with a desperate teenage mother who couldn't keep her newborn. "I created the deception because I feared you wouldn't accept a child that wasn't genetically ours," Olivia confessed, tears streaming down her face. The fake ultrasound pictures, the birth certificate, the story about our miracle treatment, all lies I crafted because I wanted so badly to give you the family you deserved. Emma watched in stunned silence as Olivia detailed the elaborate lengths she'd gone to, including bribing clinic staff and creating false medical records. She spoke of her guilt, her fear of discovery, and finally her determination to tell Jackson the truth when they returned to Seattle. "I love Sophie with every fiber of my being," Olivia said, wiping tears. "She is our daughter in every way that matters. But you deserve honesty, and Sophie deserves to know her origins someday. I only hope you can forgive me." The video ended, leaving Emma staring at a black screen that reflected her own shocked expression. The implications were staggering. Jackson had no idea his daughter wasn't biologically his. Sophie's entire legal status might be compromised by Olivia's well-intentioned deception. Emma closed the laptop, her hands trembling. This discovery went far beyond her role as nanny. The ethical implications alone were overwhelming. Did she tell Jackson and potentially shatter his connection to Sophie, or keep Olivia's secret, allowing him to raise a child obtained through questionable means? Sophie's cries came through the monitor, signaling the end of her nap. Emma rose automatically to tend to her, mind still reeling. As she lifted the baby from her crib, Sophie's sleepy smile struck her heart with new poignancy. "Oh, sweet girl," Emma whispered, holding her close. "What am I supposed to do?" Sophie gurgled happily, oblivious to the revelation that had just upended her caregiver's world, and would soon change her father's life forever. For 3 days, Emma carried Olivia's secret like a physical weight, her sleep fractured by endless, ethical calculations. During daylight hours, she maintained her routines with Sophie, smiling through baby games while her mind churned with impossible choices. Each time Jackson interacted with his daughter, his pride when she rolled over, his tenderness during bedtime stories, Emma's resolve wavered. How could she destroy the foundation of their relationship? Yet how could she withhold such crucial information? On the third night after Sophie was asleep, Emma retreated to her suite and made a video call to Professor Martinez, her former ethics instructor at community college. The older woman's familiar face brought immediate comfort. "Emma Taylor, what a wonderful surprise," Professor Martinez exclaimed. "How's Seattle treating you?" "It's complicated," Emma admitted. "I need your guidance on something, hypothetical." The professor's expression grew serious. "I'm listening." Emma chose her words carefully. "If someone discovered a significant family secret, one that could fundamentally change relationships, does that person have an obligation to reveal it?" "That depends on several factors," Martinez replied thoughtfully. "What's the nature of this person's relationship to the family? What harm might come from either disclosure or continued secrecy? Let's say this person works for the family but has become invested in their welfare," Emma said, "and the secret involves a child's origins. Information that could affect legal status, identity, everything. Professor Martinez studied Emma through the screen. This doesn't sound hypothetical, Emma. Emma sighed. I can't share specifics. You don't need to. The professor leaned closer. Listen carefully. Secrets like this destroy families eventually. Truth, handled compassionately, is the only path forward. Whatever short-term pain disclosure causes, it prevents the greater damage of discovery under worse circumstances. After ending the call, Emma stared at her reflection in the darkened screen. The professor was right. If Jackson discovered later that Emma had known and stayed silent, any trust between them would be irreparably broken. The decision made, Emma spent another sleepless night rehearsing approaches. By morning, dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her determination was set. She waited until evening when Sophie was settled for the night. Jackson was in his office, reviewing quarterly reports. Emma knocked softly. Do you have a minute? She asked, heart pounding so hard she wondered if he could hear it. Jackson gestured to the chair across from his desk. Of course. Is everything all right? You've seemed distracted lately. Emma clasped her hands tightly in her lap. There's something I need to tell you about the baby book project. Did you find something? Jackson's expression was open, curious. Yes. Emma swallowed hard. While organizing the files, I found a folder that I believe was meant for you to find eventually. Jackson's brow furrowed. What do you mean? It was labeled, "Oh, I think for Olivia." Emma forced herself to continue. There were video files inside. Messages from her. The color drained from Jackson's face. You accessed private files? I thought they were more baby pictures, Emma explained. I used Sophie's birth date as the password, but it didn't work. Then I tried Olivia's birth date, and it opened. You had no right, Jackson began, but Emma pressed on. The most recent video contained information about Sophie. Important information that affects both of you. Jackson fell silent, conflict evident in his expression, anger at the invasion of privacy warring with curiosity about his late wife's messages. Show me, he finally said. Emma pulled up the video on her tablet and placed it before him. I'll give you privacy, she said, rising. No. Jackson's command stopped her. Stay. Whatever this is, I want you here. Emma sank back into the chair, watching Jackson's face as Olivia's image appeared on screen. His expression softened instantly, fingers reaching toward the tablet as if to touch his wife's face. Then came Olivia's confession. Emma saw the precise moment comprehension dawned, Jackson's body stiffening, his jaw clenching, eyes widening in disbelief. When the video ended, he sat motionless, staring at the blank screen. Jackson? Emma ventured after the silence stretched unbearably. I need time to process this, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Please give me space. Emma nodded, rising quietly. At the door, she paused. I'm sorry, I thought you needed to know. Jackson didn't respond, his gaze fixed on something only he could see. For the next week, he was a ghost in his own home, leaving before Emma and Sophie woke, returning after they'd gone to bed. The few times they crossed paths, his eyes slid past her, his grief and betrayal manifesting as icy silence. Emma continued caring for Sophie, her heart breaking for both father and daughter. The baby sensed the household tension becoming fussier and clingy. He'll come around, Emma whispered to Sophie during midnight comforting. He loves you too much not to. She hoped for all their sakes that her words were true. On the 8th, day after Emma's revelation, Jackson arrived home unexpectedly early. She was in the kitchen preparing Sophie's dinner when he appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, he said, voice flat. My office, 5 minutes. Emma's stomach knotted as she finished feeding Sophie and settled her in the playpen. The baby watched with solemn eyes, sensing the tension. It'll be okay, sweet pea, Emma assured her, wishing she believed it herself. Jackson stood at the window when Emma entered his office, back rigid, hands clasped behind him. He didn't turn immediately. "I've been thinking about what happened," he finally said. Emma remained silent, waiting. "You had no right to access those files," Jackson continued, turning to face her. His eyes were red-rimmed from sleepless nights. "That was between my wife and me." "I didn't intentionally invade your privacy," Emma replied carefully. "But once I knew, I couldn't pretend I didn't. You could have left it alone." The sudden vehemence in his voice made her flinch. "Do you have any idea what this means? Everything I believed about Sophie, about Olivia, all of it undermined." Emma took a steadying breath. "I understand you're hurting." "No, you don't understand," Jackson cut in. "You can't possibly understand what it's like to discover the woman you loved, the woman you're grieving, lied about something so fundamental." His pain filled the room, raw and pulsating. Emma wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but the barrier between them had never been more insurmountable. "Sophie is still the same baby she was before," she said softly. "She still needs you. She still loves you." "Is she?" Jackson's laugh was bitter. "Who is she, really? Some teenager's unwanted child that Olivia bought? A baby with unknown medical history, unknown genetic background?" "She's your daughter," Emma insisted. "Biology doesn't change that." Jackson shook his head, moving to his desk. "I can't look at you without being reminded of Olivia's deception. Every time I see you with Sophie, I remember the moment my world collapsed again." Emma felt cold dread spreading through her chest. "What are you saying?" "I've contacted a nanny agency. They're sending someone tomorrow for an interview." Jackson wouldn't meet her eyes. "I think it would be best if you left within 3 days." The words hit Emma like physical blows. "You're firing me? Because I told you the truth?" "I'm terminating our arrangement because it's no longer working," Jackson replied mechanically. "You'll receive a generous severance package and excellent references." "This isn't about references." Emma's voice rose despite her efforts to remain calm. "This is about Sophie. She's bonded with me. Separating us will cause her emotional trauma. That's my concern now, not yours." Jackson's tone left no room for argument. "I appreciate everything you've done, but this decision is final." Emma stood, frozen, disbelieving. After everything, after the progress they'd made, the trust they'd built, the almost family they'd formed, he was discarding her like a reminder of bad news. "You're punishing me for being the messenger," she said quietly. Flicker of something, guilt perhaps, crossed Jackson's face before the mask of cold detachment returned. "My sister will be here tomorrow to help with the transition. She'll stay until the new nanny is settled." Emma nodded, too numb to argue further. "May I say goodbye to Sophie properly?" "Of course." Jackson glanced at his watch. "I have calls to make. We can discuss logistics tomorrow." Dismissed. Just like that. Emma returned to the living room where Sophie played contentedly, unaware her world was about to be upended again. Kneeling beside the playpen, Emma stroked the baby's soft cheek, memorizing every perfect feature. "I love you, sweet girl," she whispered, tears threatening. "So much." The next 2 days passed in a blur of packing and painful attempts at normalcy. Catherine arrived, her usual vibrancy subdued as she observed the tense household. "He's not thinking clearly," she told Emma while they packed Sophie's favorite toys for a trip to the park, an outing designed to get Emma away while the new nanny interviewed. "Give him time to process." "Time won't matter if I'm gone," Emma replied, carefully folding Sophie's little jacket. "He's made his decision." Catherine sighed. "My brother is stubborn and hurt, but he's not stupid. Eventually he'll realize what he's throwing away." On her final morning, Emma rose early to spend precious last moments with Sophie. The baby was unusually fussy, as if sensing the impending separation. "Shh, it's okay," Emma soothed, though her own tears fell freely. "You'll be fine, sweet pea. Your daddy loves you so much." Jackson remained in his office during the goodbye, delegating the painful moment to Catherine, who stood awkwardly nearby. "I'll check on you," she promised Emma. "Let you know how she's doing." Emma nodded, unable to speak as she placed a final kiss on Sophie's forehead. The baby clutched at her shirt, whimpering. "Take care of her," Emma managed, transferring Sophie to Catherine's arms. With one last look at the home that had briefly felt like hers, Emma walked to the waiting taxi, her few belongings already loaded. Only when the house disappeared from view did she allow herself to break down completely, sobs racking her body as the driver pretended not to notice. Her old roommate Melissa had agreed to let her stay temporarily, but Emma had never felt more adrift. Cut off from the child who had become the center of her world, cast out by the man she'd grown to care for despite her best efforts not to. The greatest pain was knowing that somewhere in that beautiful lakeside house Sophie was crying for her, and for the first time Emma wouldn't be there to answer. February in Seattle brought relentless rain that matched Emma's mood. She spent the first week after leaving the Bennett household in a fog of grief, startling awake at night thinking she heard Sophie crying through the monitor. "You need to get out," Melissa insisted after finding Emma staring blankly at cooking shows for the third consecutive day. "Apply for jobs, see people, something." Emma knew her friend was right. The generous severance package from Jackson would sustain her for months, but purpose was what she truly needed. She began applying for restaurant positions throughout Seattle, her culinary dream rekindled as a lifeline to cling to. The rejections came steadily. Either she was overqualified for server positions or underqualified for kitchen work without formal training. Each no deepened her isolation until Catherine called with an unexpected update. "He's on his third nanny since you left," Catherine reported. "None of them last more than 2 weeks." Emma sat straighter. "How's Sophie?" Catherine's hesitation spoke volumes. "Not great. She's not sleeping well, barely eating. Jackson took her to Dr. Reynolds yesterday." The mention of Sophie's pediatrician sent a pang through Emma's chest. "What did he say?" "She's lost weight, regressing developmentally." Catherine's voice softened. Dr. Reynolds was blunt, told Jackson that children form strong attachments, and losing her primary caregiver so suddenly, especially after already losing her mother, has created significant trauma. Emma closed her eyes, picturing Sophie's distressed face. "He needs consistency for her, not a parade of strangers." "I know that. You know that." Catherine sighed. "Jackson is struggling. He's trying to process Olivia's deception while being a single parent, not making great decisions." "Has he accepted that Sophie isn't biologically his?" Emma asked carefully. "He hasn't said explicitly, but he takes her to every doctor's appointment, hasn't missed a day with her. Whatever his feelings about Olivia's lies, he loves that baby." After the call, Emma felt simultaneously better and worse, relieved that Jackson remained devoted to Sophie, devastated that the baby was suffering. 2 days later, Emma received an offer from Rosemary's Kitchen, a family-owned restaurant in Tacoma. The position was line cook with potential for advancement. Not ideal, but a start. The commute from Seattle was daunting, so Emma found a small studio apartment nearby, using part of her severance for the deposit. "You're moving to Tacoma?" Melissa asked, helping her pack. "That's decisive." Emma folded a sweater with precise movements. "I need a fresh start, away from reminders." The studio was tiny but clean, within walking distance of the restaurant. Emma filled it with secondhand furniture and cooking equipment, determined to create a new life focused on her original dream. Working at Rosemary's was physically demanding but mentally healing. The owners, an older couple who'd run the place for 30 years, appreciated Emma's Southern cooking knowledge and willingness to learn. Customers responded to her genuine warmth, often requesting her recipes. Still, Sophie's absence remained a constant ache. Emma found herself automatically noting developmental milestones the baby would be reaching, saving recipes suitable for a growing infant, even purchasing a children's book that reminded her of Sophie's favorite bedtime story. Meanwhile, across the city, Jackson's carefully structured world continued unraveling. The fourth nanny quit after just 3 days, citing Sophie's inconsolable behavior and impossible standards from her father. During a particularly difficult night when Sophie had screamed for hours, Jackson called his sister in desperation. "Don't know what to do anymore," he admitted, voice ragged with exhaustion. "She hates everyone I hire." "She doesn't hate them," Catherine replied gently. "She's grieving just like you were after Olivia died. She lost her mother and then she lost Emma, the only other person who made her feel safe." "What are you saying?" Jackson asked, though he already knew. "I'm saying you punished Emma for being the messenger," Catherine answered bluntly. "You fired the one person who was holding your family together, because facing her meant facing Olivia's deception." The truth of her words hit Jackson with physical force. He glanced at the baby monitor where Sophie had finally fallen into fitful sleep. "It wouldn't matter even if you were right," he said. "Emma's gone. Probably hates me, as she should." "Have you tried finding her?" Catherine asked. Jackson hadn't. Part of him feared confirmation that he'd destroyed something irreplaceable through his grief-fueled reaction. The following week, during Sophie's checkup, Dr. Reynolds expressed growing concern about the baby's regression. "Children are remarkably resilient, Mr. Bennett," the doctor said, reviewing Sophie's chart, "but they need stability. The constant change in caregivers is taking a toll on her physical and emotional development." Jackson nodded, holding his daughter closer. "I know. May I speak frankly?" Dr. Reynolds removed her glasses. "What happened to Emma? Sophie was thriving under her care." The question pierced Jackson's carefully maintained defenses. "She left," he replied, the partial truth bitter on his tongue. Dr. Reynolds gave him a look that suggested she knew better but wouldn't press. "Well, finding someone with a similar nurturing approach would be in Sophie's best interest." That night, after another difficult bedtime routine, Jackson found himself reviewing Olivia's medical records, seeking information about genetic conditions Sophie might inherit. Instead, he discovered documentation confirming Olivia's infertility, diagnosis years earlier, irrefutable proof the adoption story was true. The reality he'd been avoiding crashed through his remaining denial. Sophie wasn't biologically his, but she was unquestionably his daughter in every way that mattered, and he'd driven away the one person who understood that distinction instinctively. "I need to find Emma," he told Catherine the next morning. "For Sophie's sake." Catherine smiled for the first time in weeks. "I thought you'd never ask." Jackson's search for Emma began with uncomfortable realizations about how little he actually knew about her personal life. In his grief and self-absorption, he'd never asked basic questions. Her hometown in Georgia, her favorite foods, her aspirations beyond caring for Sophie. She had been present in his home for months, yet remained fundamentally a stranger. "This is humiliating," he admitted to Catherine over the phone. "I don't even know her middle name." "Start with what you do know," his sister advised pragmatically. Her previous roommate, the restaurant where she worked. Melissa proved surprisingly difficult to locate. She'd moved shortly after Emma left, but Jackson eventually tracked her, down through Cascade Restaurant's manager. "Why should I tell you anything about Emma?" Melissa demanded when he finally reached her. "You fired her for telling you the truth." She was devastated. Jackson winced at her justified anger. "I made a terrible mistake. I need to make it right. For Sophie and for Emma." Melissa's silence stretched across the line until finally, she relented. "She's working at Rosemary's Kitchen in Tacoma. That's all I'm saying. The rest is up to her." The information coincided with Jackson's discovery of another shocking document among Olivia's hidden files, legal adoption papers she had begun but never completed. The implication sent cold fear through him. Without proper documentation, Sophie's legal status was precarious at best. "What happens if the biological mother comes looking for her?" he asked his family attorney. "What rights do I have?" The answer was devastating. Very few. Without completed adoption proceedings or biological connection, his claim to Sophie rested on increasingly shaky ground. That evening, Jackson sat in Sophie's nursery, watching his daughter sleep fitfully. Her tiny face, so like Olivia's in certain expressions, bore no genetic connection to either of them, yet she was unquestionably his child. I'll fix this, he whispered, stroking her cheek. I promise. The next morning, he made arrangements for Catherine to watch Sophie and drove to Tacoma, the adoption papers secured in his briefcase. Rosemary's Kitchen turned out to be a cozy establishment with checkered tablecloths and the aroma of home cooking wafting from the open kitchen. Jackson selected a corner table with a clear view of the restaurant's interior. Lunch service was in full swing, servers navigating between tables with practiced efficiency. Then he saw her. Emma emerged from the kitchen carrying plates, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, chef's coat slightly too large for her frame. The sight hit him with unexpected force. She looked different, thinner, more subdued, but moved with the same graceful competence he remembered. Jackson watched as she delivered orders, pausing to chat with elderly customers, her smile genuine but not reaching her eyes. For 2 hours, he observed her work, postponing the inevitable confrontation. What right did he have to disrupt her new life? She seemed settled, if not happy. Perhaps it would be kinder to leave her in peace. Then Sophie's face appeared in his mind. Her distress, without Emma, her developmental regression, her need for stability. This wasn't just about his comfort or Emma's new beginning. It was about what his daughter needed. When the lunch rush subsided, Jackson requested Emma as his server. He watched her approach his table, observing the precise moment recognition. Dawned, her steps faltering, eyes widening, professional smile freezing in place. Jackson, she said, her voice carefully neutral, despite her obvious shock. What are you doing here? He gestured to the chair across from him. May I have a moment of your time? Please. Emma glanced toward the kitchen, then nodded curtly. 5 minutes, that's all. Once seated, her posture remained rigid, defensive. How did you find me? Your former roommate, Jackson admitted. It wasn't easy. Sophie? The question emerged instantly, her concern for the baby overriding any resentment. Not doing well, Jackson replied. Honestly. She misses you. Emma's composure wavered slightly. Children are resilient. She'll adjust to someone new. She's had 4 someone new since you left. None of them worked out. Jackson leaned forward. But that's not the only reason. I'm here. He removed the adoption paperwork from his briefcase, placing it between them. I found these among Olivia's things. She had begun legitimate adoption proceedings but never completed them. Emma's gaze fell to the documents, understanding blooming in her expression. Sophie's legal status. Jackson nodded grimly. Is precarious, at best. I have no biological claim to her, and the adoption was never finalized. The birth mother? Emma asked, immediately grasping the implications. Unknown. Olivia's records only mention a teenage mother in crisis. No names, no details that could help locate her. Jackson ran a hand through his disheveled hair. My attorney is exploring options, but without more information. Emma's professional mask slipped, genuine concern replacing caution. What will you do? Whatever it takes to keep her, Jackson stated firmly. She's my daughter. Biology be damned. Something shifted in Emma's expression. A softening, a recognition of the truth in his words. I reacted badly when you showed me Olivia's video, Jackson continued. I was shocked, hurt, angry, but not at you, never truly at you. I lashed out at the messenger because facing the message was too painful. You asked me to leave, Emma reminded him, the hurt still evident, beneath her controlled tone. The worst mistake I've made in a long list of bad decisions. Jackson met her gaze directly. Sophie hasn't been the same without you. Neither have I. A server approached their table, breaking the moment. Emma stood quickly. I need to get back. To work. Emma, please. Jackson reached for her hand but stopped short of touching her. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but would you at least consider coming to see Sophie? She needs you. Emma's conflict played across her expressive face, longing to see the baby warring with self-protection. I have tomorrow afternoon off, she said finally. I could stop by just to check on her. Relief washed through Jackson. Thank you. That's... more than I deserve. As Emma returned to the kitchen, Jackson watched her go, hope cautiously rekindling. This visit wasn't reconciliation, merely a fragile beginning. But for Sophie's sake, for all their sakes, perhaps it would be enough. The drive to Jackson's lakeside home felt surreal to Emma, familiar landmarks triggering memories both painful and precious. She'd deliberately chosen to visit during Sophie's usual afternoon playtime, when the baby would be most alert and receptive. This is just to see Sophie, Emma reminded herself as she parked in the driveway. Nothing more. Catherine opened the door before Emma could knock, relief evident in her expression. "Thank you for coming," she said, embracing Emma briefly. "He's been impossible, and she's been worse." Jackson appeared in the hallway, Sophie in his arms. The baby's listless demeanor transformed instantly at the sight of Emma. Tiny arms reached out, an excited squeal escaping her lips. "Emma!" Sophie's first recognizable word pierced Emma's carefully constructed defenses. "Oh, sweet girl," Emma whispered, tears threatening as Jackson transferred the squirming baby into her arms. Sophie clutched Emma's sweater with desperate intensity, burying her face against her neck with a contented sigh. Jackson watched their reunion, guilt and hope warring in his expression. "She's been saying that for weeks. We thought it was just babbling until Catherine realized she was asking for you." Emma swallowed hard, breathing in Sophie's familiar baby scent. "She's lighter than I remember. Down 12% from her last healthy weight," Jackson confirmed. "Dr. Reynolds is concerned." Catherine tactfully retreated to the kitchen, leaving them alone. Jackson gestured toward the living room. "Can we talk?" Emma followed, settling on the couch with Sophie still clinging to her. The baby seemed afraid to release her grip, as if Emma might disappear again. "I was wrong," Jackson began without preamble. "Firing you was reactive, selfish, and ultimately harmful to Sophie. I'm genuinely sorry." His direct apology, without qualification or excuse, surprised Emma. "I understand why you were upset," she replied carefully. "Finding out about Olivia's deception must have been devastating." "It was," Jackson acknowledged. "But punishing you for delivering the message was inexcusable." Sophie had begun playing with Emma's necklace, her small fingers tracing the pendant with fascination. A normal, healthy behavior that had been absent for weeks. "Look at her," Jackson said softly. 5 minutes with you, and she's already more engaged than she's been in 2 months. The observation hung between them, undeniable evidence of the bond that transcended Emma's employment status. "I'd like you to consider coming back," Jackson continued, "under whatever terms you find acceptable. If you want to maintain your apartment in Tacoma, work fewer hours, name your conditions." Emma stroked Sophie's hair, considering. "What about the adoption issue?" "My attorney is pursuing every possible avenue," Jackson replied. "The legal situation is complicated, but my commitment to Sophie isn't. Biology or not, she's my daughter." His certainty reassured Emma more than any legal strategy could have. This was the Jackson she'd come to respect, determined, principled, putting Sophie's welfare above all else. "I've started a new life in Tacoma," Emma said, watching his face fall slightly. "The restaurant owners are considering supporting my application to culinary school." "That's wonderful," Jackson said, visibly struggling to mask his disappointment. "Your dream from the storm night?" Emma was touched he remembered such a small detail from their fireside conversation months ago. "Yes." Sophie had drifted to sleep against Emma's chest, her tiny hand still clutching the necklace. The peaceful expression on her face spoke volumes about the security she felt in Emma's presence. "What if?" Jackson hesitated, then continued more confidently. "What if I could help with culinary school? Part-time hours here, education support. Sophie needs you, but I don't want to derail your dreams." The offer was tempting, but Emma recognized the need for clearer boundaries than before. Their previous arrangement had blurred professional and personal lines in ways that proved painful when severed. "I'd need some conditions," she said finally. "I'll keep my apartment in Tacoma, somewhere that's just mine. I want a formal employment contract reviewed by my own lawyer, and Sophie's care would be my priority but not my only focus. Jackson nodded, hope kindling in his eyes. Absolutely. Whatever you need. And, Emma added, meeting his gaze directly, we need professional distance, Jackson. What almost happened during the storm night, it complicated things. A flash of something, disappointment perhaps, crossed his face before he composed himself. Understood. Completely professional, they spent the next hour discussing logistics while Sophie slept peacefully between them. Emma would work 4 days at the Bennett home, maintaining her weekend position at Rosemary's Kitchen. Jackson would adjust his schedule to be home earlier on her days off. Most importantly, they established clear communication protocols to prevent misunderstandings. Before leaving, Emma gently transferred the sleeping Sophie to Jackson's arms. The baby stirred but didn't wake, her face relaxed in a way it hadn't been for months. I'll start tomorrow, Emma said. Just part-time at first. To help her transition. Jackson nodded, relief evident in his posture. Thank you for giving us another chance. I know I don't deserve it. I'm not doing it for you, Emma clarified, though without hostility. I'm doing it for her. As she drove back to Tacoma, Emma recognized that despite her stated boundaries, her heart remained dangerously involved with both Bennett family members. The professional distance she'd insisted upon would require vigilance, particularly when Sophie's delighted smile at seeing her again had been matched only by the unmistakable warmth in Jackson's eyes. She'd built walls to protect herself, but Emma wondered if they were already crumbling, and whether that was entirely a bad thing. 6 months after Emma's return, the Bennett household had transformed. Sophie, now 15 months old, had not only regained her lost weight but thrived developmentally, taking her first steps, expanding her vocabulary daily, and showing the curious, playful nature that had been suppressed during the separation. Emma had settled into a carefully balanced routine between her responsibilities at the Bennett home and her culinary studies at Seattle Central College. True to his word, Jackson had arranged his schedule to accommodate her classes and maintained professional boundaries, though the attraction between them sometimes crackled in the air like static electricity, acknowledged but never acted upon. 1. Wednesday evening in early August, Emma arrived home from class to find Jackson in his office, tension evident in his hunched shoulders as he conducted a video conference. Sophie was already asleep, her evening routine completed by the part-time sitter who covered Emma's class nights. Emma moved quietly past the office, not wanting to disturb what appeared to be an important meeting, but Jackson spotted her and gestured for her to wait. Minutes later, he emerged, looking both exhausted and wired. Everything okay? Emma asked, noting his disheveled appearance. Business situation, Jackson replied vaguely, running a hand through his hair. Nothing for you to worry about. Emma raised an eyebrow. I may be just the nanny in professional terms, but I think we've moved beyond dismissive responses, don't you? Jackson's expression softened. You're right. I'm sorry. He sighed deeply. Singatech made an offer to acquire my company. It would solve our financial struggles completely, but, Emma prompted when he hesitated. They want me in Singapore. 18 months minimum to oversee the transition and integration. The implications hung heavily between them. You'd take Sophie? Emma asked, her chest tightening at the thought. That's the expectation. Jackson's conflicted expression revealed his turmoil. It's an incredible opportunity financially, but the timing. When do they need an answer? Tomorrow noon. Jackson checked his watch. 11 hours from now. Emma absorbed this, mind racing through the potential consequences. Sophie, finally stable and thriving, uprooted to a foreign country. The custody situation, still legally tenuous despite their attorney's progress. Her own role, suddenly obsolete. What are you thinking? She asked carefully. Jackson leaned against the doorframe, exhaustion evident. I'm thinking about Sophie, about the company staff who depend on me, about our financial security. I'm thinking about everything and everyone. Get some rest, Emma advised gently. Decisions like this shouldn't be made on an empty tank. Later that night, unable to sleep, Emma wandered into the garden. The August air was warm, fragrant with late summer blooms. She settled on a bench, gazing at the lake shimmering under moonlight. The sound of the patio door sliding open interrupted her solitude. Jackson appeared, 2 mugs in hand. "Chamomile," he offered, extending one to her. "I saw your light on." They sat in companionable silence, the gravity of tomorrow's decision suspended temporarily between them. "What would you do?" Jackson finally asked. "If it were your decision." Emma considered carefully before responding. "I can't answer that. This is your life, your company, your daughter. You're part of this too," Jackson said quietly. "Whatever I decide affects you." The admission touched Emma deeply. Sophie has stability now. She's forming attachments, developing normally, another major disruption. "I know." Jackson stared into his mug. "The company's struggling, but not failing. We could survive without the acquisition." "But your investors want the deal," Emma guessed. Jackson nodded. "My business partner is pushing hard. The money is." He exhaled sharply. "Life-changing. Generational wealth." "Money matters," Emma acknowledged. "But it's not everything." The following morning, Emma took Sophie to the garden to give Jackson space for his decision. The baby was now walking with assistance, her chubby legs gaining confidence as she clutched Emma's fingers for support. "Look at the butterfly, sweet pea," Emma pointed, delighting in Sophie's wide-eyed wonder at the delicate creature landing on a nearby flower. Movement caught her attention, Jackson standing at the garden's edge, watching them. His expression held such tenderness it made Emma's breath catch. Something had shifted in his demeanor overnight. A weight lifted. Sophie spotted her father and squealed happily. Attempting to toddle toward him, Jackson crossed the garden swiftly, kneeling to receive his daughter's enthusiastic if unsteady advance. "Da-da-da!" Sophie exclaimed, collapsing into his arms. "That's right, sweet girl," Jackson murmured, holding her close. "Daddy's right here, always." The simple declaration contained multitudes. Emma met his gaze over Sophie's head, understanding dawning even before he spoke. "I'm staying," he said simply. "I proposed an alternate arrangement, selling a minority stake while maintaining Seattle operations and majority control." "Your partner won't be happy," Emma observed. "He's furious," Jackson confirmed without regret. "Told me I was making the biggest mistake of my career." A smile touched his lips. "Said it was because of that nanny." Emma's pulse quickened. "And what did you tell him?" "That it's because I finally understand what success actually means." Jackson looked at Sophie, then back to Emma. It took nearly losing everything that matters to gain that clarity. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, Jackson found Emma on the patio, organizing her class notes for the following day. "I never thanked you," he said, settling in the chair beside her. "For what?" "For coming back. For giving Sophie stability when I couldn't. For—" he hesitated. "For showing me what matters through your example." Emma closed her notebook, touched by his sincerity. "Sophie was always what mattered to you, Jackson. You just needed to remember that." "Not just Sophie," he said quietly, his gaze holding hers. The admission hung between them, neither quite ready to grasp it fully, but both unwilling to let it disappear. 1 year later, Seattle's summer sun streamed through the windows of Emma's southern kitchen, casting golden light across freshly polished tables. The small cafe, nestled in a renovated storefront near Pike Place Market, represented the culmination of Emma's lifelong dream. A dream made possible by Jackson's investment as a silent partner following her graduation from culinary school. In the kitchen, Emma put finishing touches on a towering birthday cake, 2.5 candles for a very special little girl. Sophie's birthday celebration would be the cafe's first private event before its official opening next week. "Need any help?" asked Eleanor, Emma's grandmother, who had moved to Seattle 3 months ago after successful heart surgery, covered by the health insurance from Emma's new business. "Just making sure everything's perfect," Emma replied, adjusting a sugar flour. Eleanor smiled knowingly. It's not every day a girl turns 2.5, though I'm still not clear why we're celebrating half birthdays now. It was Jackson's idea, Emma explained. After everything Sophie's been through, he says every milestone deserves recognition. The year had brought extraordinary changes for all of them. Emma had completed culinary school with honors while continuing to care for Sophie. Jackson had stabilized his company after the partial acquisition, working primarily from home to be present for his daughter. Most significantly, the courts had finally recognized Jackson's adoption of Sophie after extensive legal proceedings, the final documentation arriving just last month. The cafe's door chimed, announcing Jackson's arrival, with a guest of honor. Sophie bounded in, dark curls bouncing, wearing a dress that matched the cafe's blue and yellow color scheme. "Emma! Gamma!" she called, rushing toward them with the exuberance only toddlers possess. "My cake!" Emma scooped her up, kissing her cheek. "Happy half-birthday, sweet pea. Do you like your cake?" Sophie nodded solemnly. "Butterflies and flowers. My favorites." Jackson approached more slowly, carrying gift bags and balloons. The past year had softened him, laugh lines now balancing the worry creases that had once dominated his expression. "The place looks amazing," he said, taking in the cafe's warm, inviting decor, a perfect blend of Seattle modern and Southern comfort. "Your recipe's on these walls at last." Emma's heart swelled with pride. The menu featured dishes from her Georgia childhood alongside Pacific Northwest favorites, her heritage and her new home coexisting harmoniously. Guests began arriving, Catherine with her new boyfriend, Melissa and her husband, Emma's culinary, school classmates, and Jackson's sister-in-law with Olivia's parents, who had remained devoted grandparents to Sophie, despite the revelations about her origins. During the celebration, Emma watched Jackson interact with the guests, more relaxed, more present than the grief-stricken man she'd met at Cascade Restaurant nearly 2 years ago. He caught her watching and smiled, the private communication between them immediate and effortless. Their relationship had evolved gradually over the past year. Emma had moved into the apartment above the cafe while maintaining her role in Sophie's life. The arrangement gave her independence while allowing Sophie the stability of 2 loving caregivers. Though never explicitly discussed, their co-parenting partnership had deepened into something neither could easily define. After cake and presents as guests mingled in the sun-dappled cafe, Jackson pulled Emma aside into the small office at the back. "I have something for you," he said, handing her a small envelope. A cafe-warming gift. Inside was a key, attached to a hand-carved wooden tag reading, "Emma's Southern Kitchen." "You already gave me the investment," Emma said, confused. "And I have keys," Jackson smiled. "That's not a key to the cafe, it's to the house, officially. I had the locks changed yesterday and the security system reprogrammed." He took a breath. "I want you to have full access, not as an employee, but as—" He faltered, suddenly uncertain. Emma waited, heart pounding. "The thing is," Jackson continued, gathering courage, "we've created something neither of us expected, a family built on choice rather than obligation. Sophie has 2 homes now, the house with me and your apartment above the cafe. But I find myself wondering if maybe—" "If maybe what?" Emma prompted gently when he hesitated again. "If you might consider making our co-parenting arrangement more permanent," Jackson finally managed, his expression vulnerable and hopeful. "In whatever way feels right to you." The question, not quite a proposal, but more than a suggestion, hung between them. Emma looked at the key in her palm, the weight of it representing far more than access to a building.